Today, this is number 3 in our series, and probably going to finish it up next week. This week, we're going to talk about how wives should treat their husbands. Well, I'm going to try and keep it in one, honestly. But thus you have the whole, don't be prodding your wife, okay? I don't want to see you hurt throughout the remainder of the week, but look at Ephesians chapter 5, start in verse 22, and just read those 3 verses with me. It says, "Wives, submit yourself unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything." You know I'm just ribbing you, right? Okay. Yeah, sure. Bill and Annabelle Gilham had given a list of qualities that a man needs in his wife. Some of the things that they included were a need for faithfulness, a need for submission to his decisions, for encouragement when things go wrong, a need to be consulted for advice in making decisions and plans, and this is one that a lot of guys don't think about, but it is a need, to be confronted about flesh patterns. What kind of stuff we do. When Kathy and I first got together, and I'll be a little open with you on this, I was not saved. I was definitely a man of the world, and we'd be cruising through the mall or something. I'd see a pretty girl, and I'd be like, yeah. And she'd do the, and that was one of those things that I needed because it helped keep me on the right track. I'm glad to say she does not have to do that anymore. I have eyes only for my wife, and God intended it that way. But I've done it. We've been there. So it's one of those things that we need help with in terms of accountability. But a man needs a wife with moral standards. If you guys notice some of the marriages that go on in Hollywood, they're not very long. Most of them will dissipate within the first year to, Brittany was married for like 4 months or something, I think, the first time. From anywhere within the span of a year up to 3-5 years, you get a 10-year-old marriage in Hollywood now, and they're like, yeah, that's fantastic. We got people that have been married a half a century, and that's fantastic. Okay, we're looking for longevity. But some of the problems that come out of Hollywood is the women are lacking in moral character. They're into the party life, they're into the pomp and the glam, and they want people to notice them. You know who Kathy wants to notice her? Me. And that's fantastic, because I do notice her. She's a beautiful woman. But when I'll point out to her, because she's not looking for attention, I'll point out to her, man, that guy giving you the googly eyes. He understands you, a fine-looking woman, and she's like, oh. She gets embarrassed by it. She starts checking her clothes to make sure she's dressed modest and, nothing hanging out that shouldn't be hanging out. That's the kind of moral character that women need. My wife has a body for her husband, and her husband only. She doesn't need to flaunt that. When in the things that she wants them in terms of the relationship with her husband, and nothing extravagant beyond that. Now, ladies like diamonds, ladies like jewelry. Most normal ladies like chocolate, but my wife doesn't, which is weird because I can't buy her chocolates without eating them. But that's kind of a win for me. But we need women with moral standards. We need women who will recognize us as spiritual leaders. Now, husbands, let me say this to you. I'm going to get into this next week. So start to evaluate where you're standing at. If we need them to recognize us as spiritual leaders, we need to be spiritual leaders. And I'll just leave it there for this week. But we need that. We need women who respect us, who lets other people see that they respect us. And we need women that is my partner for life. I don't want a woman that's roaming and wandering. Oh, goodness gracious. I do not want a Gomer. Okay? One man and one woman. That's the ideal marriage. There are 3 specific needs, though, that I want to address this morning, and only 3. And because I think they're kind of key. Again, if you go into the context of many of the marriage passages, we get sidetracked by all the wish-wash and the widgy-waddle, husband is head of the wife, but we miss everything else about that, like setting God first. These are the three, I think, absolute most significant particular needs that a man has for his wife, and it's something that I think that women need to be, wives need to be aware of. The first one is a unique, very unique need for praise. Well, my wife loves to be praised. And I do. I try to make that a habit of mine in telling her, you know, you're a fantastic cook. I brag on her to other people outstandingly. And I can brag with her in the room. I can brag with her out of the room. Some of the things I miss out on is bragging on her when it's just me and her. I want her to understand I appreciate, I love, I respect her, I admire her, even when it's just us. Okay, but men have this unique need for it. It's like a craving that we have. And I can tell you, I'm like a big stupid dog when my wife starts doting on me in public. She's like, you know, I have the most fantastic husband. I'm like, it's great. And it's something that God has hardwired into me. Okay? And when she delivers that, it's like, whoo, I could put her up on a pedestal and there'd be neon signs and zzz, zzz, she's fantastic. We have that need built into us. Women like it. Men need it. It's something that we got to have. Again, it kind of falls into that whole masculinity category, and I'm not overly masculine in terms of a chauvinistic way, but I understand that men and women are very, very different. And this is something that is built into me. We got to have it. We have a unique need for praise. We have an innate need to be the head of the home. Again, masculinity. But I need to be in charge. I have to be. When I am not in charge, some little part of me dies. And I don't know how better to explain it than that. My word is law. And if it's not that way, I'm going to tuck tail and hide under the bed until she comes to me on all fours. It's something that God developed in us. When He says that the husband is to be the head over the wife, okay? When He says that the husband is to be the spiritual leader. When He says that the husband is to be the breadwinner, to be the provider, to be the guardian, to be the protector, to be all of those things, it's because God designed us that way. We need that. And some of the trouble that we're having in marriages now is the woman has become the head of some households. She becomes the provider. She becomes the protector. She becomes all of these things that the husband was built for, and it makes a man less of a man. I don't know how better to explain it than that. But when my wife's wearing the pants, I know it, because I don't feel like I'm living up to God's expectations for me. We have a need to be the head, and last, I think, but definitely not least, men have a need for marital physical intimacy. Now, I use that term, the marital physical intimacy, because boys are stupid. S-T-O-O-P-I-D, stupid. And growing up, we have a desire for physical intimacy. We're like stinking Energizer bunnies and just wound up tighter than the drum, but that's a common thing. That's something that we need to work on in terms of restraint. But when you're married, we have a need, not just a desire, not just a want. There is a need for physical intimacy, and that is part of the woman's job in providing that. Yeah, we're just going to leave that alone. Each of these needs is related to an area of our unique makeup, and it's part of being created in the image and the likeness of God. Okay? God doesn't make no junk. God doesn't make no mistakes. So if we're hardwired this way, then obviously there's something to that. In creating man and creating woman, God designed them in the same fashion. He designed them as spirit with soul and body. Now the spirit is the soul. The spirit, that's where I'm going, is the one thing that men and women have in common. Each of our souls is unique. Each of our bodies is unique, but we all tie into the spirit because we are made in the image of God. We have that in common. It kind of goes way off kilter from there when you go into soul and body. the one identical need that you're going to run into in husbands and wives is that intimate relationship with Christ. Okay, and that's kind of a universal, no matter what age, no matter what sex, no matter what gender. I already said that. Race, creed, there we go, into those types of things. And that's, we have to know God. There is a part of us that has a desire to be with Him, and you have to recognize that first and foremost. We went kind of heavy last week on making sure that God is the center of your marriage, that it has to be Christ-centered if it is to be successful. So many marriages that I've seen they get started off on the right foot. I'd even argue that Kathy and I got started off on the right foot. We weren't saved, neither one of us, but he was a deep-fried, spitfire Southern Baptist preacher, and he made absolutely certain that I understood everything that God desired of me in being the husband, and she understood everything that God desired of her in being the wife. So we had the right start. Okay, going into it, trust me, we knew. He pounded it into us, and that's good. It's something you got to have. But after that, we kind of farted and sputtered out. Because it wasn't Christ-centered. It wasn't any of those things. And the most important aspect of our relationship, we were missing out on the spirit that we commonly shared, that desire to have that intimate relationship with Christ. Ladies, one of the things that you need to focus on is meeting your husband's needs in the area of spirit. Even more so above the physical, even more over the emotional. You need to make sure that you are doing everything that you can for Him to draw closer to Christ through you. And that's no light charge. Some of us are bullheaded and stubborn and thick-skinned, and we won't listen to reason no matter what because it's not my reason. I speak from experience. Okay? And it takes some pounding and some pummeling and some drilling, and sometimes you're going to have to borrow his power tools in order to get through. But we need to make sure, ladies, that we are building up our husbands so that they are desiring a relationship with Christ first. And everything else comes after that. Isaiah 43, chapter 2, says, "When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers, that they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee." Ladies, this is your responsibility to your husband. Is making sure that when you guys run into those deep waters in your marriage, when you run into those fiery times throughout the life of your marriage, that he's not drowning, he's not burning, he's not washing away. And you can't do that by yourself. You are not an anchor to which he is fastened. You're not a ball and chain, despite popular belief. But instead, you are somebody that will take him hand in hand and help him to remain steadfast on the rock that is our anchor, that is our kind of our ball and chain. You stay fast in Christ, and you make sure that He does the same. You notice that in this passage, it doesn't say that if you pass through deep waters. It says when. It doesn't say if you pass through the fire. It says when. Ladies, know it's coming. Know there's going to be difficulties. There's going to be issues. Get out of this teenage fairy tale princess kind of ideology of marriage. Wake up and smell the coffee. Okay, this is the really real world, and stuff doesn't always work out like that. So be anticipating those hard times. But again, when the hard times come, keep your focus on Christ and try to keep His focus on Christ. There was a story that somebody had told about he was a young man that had gone into a lay witness missions. Okay, his name was Doug, and he comes in and he's telling his story. He says, I've always been very wealthy. He said, so much so that I'm bored with taking care of all my assets, and I've hired somebody to do that for me. He says, I decided to pursue something else in life, and I went back to school and got my doctor's degree in biology. Then I became a professor at a university down in Texas. He says, and that was good. I felt enlivened, I felt vigor, but pretty soon that became boring to me also. And I decided to pursue something else in life, and this one killed me. He said, so I decided to become a Christian. It sounded like fun, apparently. He says, I went to the library and I read through lots of books on the subject. He says, I then go and I align myself with the local church, and because of my prestige in the community, immediately they start putting me on all these super important boards as far as the church goes. We'd like to think it doesn't happen that way, ladies and gentlemen, but sometimes it does. I'm just telling his story. He says, it was no surprise to me when the pastor called me one day and said, Doug, we're going to conduct a lay witness mission in our church, and I would like you to be to head the chair of the committee to prepare for this team's visit. And he said, of course I will. He says, predictably, Doug did a super job in his preparation, and the weekend arrives when all these lay people converge on the church. And he says on Friday night, the church members divided up into small groups of 8 or 10, and one lay witness went with each of these to a small room to tell about their relationship with Christ. He says, along with several other members, Doug was assigned to a small group. He continues his testimony by saying, as we were walking back to our assigned room, I began to evaluate this young man who was going to be sharing with us. He was obviously very common, very much a laboring man. He even had some oil under his fingernails, like he might have been a mechanic. Kudos. He says, I begin to think I really should be in charge of this group. He says, I'm quite sure that I could handle it much more effectively than he could. Obviously, he has the pomp and class for it, but he says, they get to the room and they sit down, and as this young man begins talking, Doug says, he begins to share about this relationship that he has with Christ. He says, I became intensely aware of something. This young man knew the Jesus that I had only been informed of. The point in this is that we need to know Jesus intimately. It's the one thing that all men and women share in common that is unchanging. And ladies, that is a part of your job as a help meet. You help him to meet Christ. You help him to grow in Christ. Sometimes it's not through badgering or preaching to him. Sometimes it's not about trying to fix them. Sometimes it's just about by being an example for them when they need it. When your husband's ranting and raving and he's about to blow his top and he's beat red in the face because he's had a terrible day and he's been working and blah, 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 and he comes home and he's kind of gruff with you, just rah! Sometimes the best thing you can do is just, I'm sorry you had a hard day, honey. I know, you'd like to smack him with a marble rolling pin. I understand that. But your responsibility for your husband is to help him draw close to God. And the Bible says that a gentle answer turns away wrath. Remember that. Because sometimes all Kathy's got to do to get me feeling just stupid, I mean, just like a heel, is just to be nice to me when I'm being a butt. And I know I'm being a butt. And she's like, well, that's too bad. Well, what would you like for dinner? Let me fix you something to eat. Can I get that for, would you like a cup of coffee? That gets me every time. Yeah, of course I'd like a cup of coffee. Help him draw close to Christ. Not just to hear about him. You don't just drag him to church so he's informed about him. Help him come to know him intimately. If your desire in a relationship for your husband is for your husband to love God more than he loves you, you're doing something right. And you keep it up, because that's going to make miraculous changes in your household. A.W. Tozer said that there comes the glorious pursuit of knowing him after the experience of salvation. Ladies, we want to help our husbands come to understand that, to feel that. As we know Christ, we become more aware of his presence in us. We become more able to allow him to live his life, his agape love, through us so that it meets the unique needs of our spouse. Now this really goes for husbands and wives, but again, more so wives than husbands. And I'll go on record as saying this, because wives, oftentimes you display and use much more common sense than your husbands. Okay? That's your house. He's the head of it, but really it's your house. You understand how it runs, you understand the trials that come with it, and you are able to look past those. I don't know how you do it, but I know that Kathy remains much calmer than I do amidst 3 screaming children. And sometimes, though she's had a hard day, and though it's wigged out in there, sometimes she brings me to a place of peace just by the example that she sets for me in her relationship with Christ. Okay, so help encourage, help to build him up in that area. You need to meet his needs in the area of the soul too. Again, spirit comes first, but recognize your husband is unique in his soul. He's very, very different than any other person. He's very, very different than you. Really, I'd argue he's different than the person that you want him to be. Okay? God created us the way we are for a purpose. We need to help meet those needs in the area of the soul. Two significant needs, I believe, in terms of the soul as far as the husband's concerned. One relates to the emotions. The other one relates to the mind. We talked about the unique need for praise. Okay, that one's kind of playing on the emotions. One of the husband's most important needs is going to fall in that category. And there's nothing, I'd say almost nothing better that you can do for him than to make him understand that he is the man of men in your life. He's a top dog. He's the alpha. He is whatever you need to call it. There is none above him in terms of human males goes in your eyes. Husbands need to praise their wives. Don't get me wrong on that. Again, we'll get into that next week. But husbands need the praise of their wives even more. We learn from an early age that we need that kind of feminine praise. If you walk outside and you see a 6-year-old dangling from the tree by a single foot, and he's just swinging back and forth, who is he calling for? Yeah, he's not going, "Hey, Dad!" He's going, Mom, come look at this. This is so cool. And Mom, of course, is going, "He's going to kill his fool self." But she's like, "That's very nice, honey. Would you get down?" We want Mom's attention. We want Mom's praise. And it gets worse as we start getting older. Pretty soon we hit that 10-year mark, and we're kind of interested in the girls now. They're not all gross and disgusting. They don't all have cooties. I'm like, "God, I wouldn't mind having some of her cooties, actually." And so the hanging from the tree is good, but you can't be calling for Mom, because if you're calling for Mom, you're not much of a man at 10 years old. And so you don't want to go, "Hey, Cindy Lou Who, check this out." You want their attention, but you don't want to call for it. And so you're hanging and you're dangling in this tree, and you might be flipping around doing Lord knows what, and you got all these sound effects going with it, so you're going to get their attention. And in your mind's eye, or your mind's ear, you're hearing them say, stuff like Mom would have said. That's just cool. That's just neat. That's awesome. Look at that guy. He's a hunk of guy. Yeah, at 10 years old, we really think that stuff. You got to believe me, ladies. We do. We start getting older. We get into teenage years, start going up into high school. All of a sudden, the girls no longer think it's cool when you're hanging from a tree. And so we look for something else. We go into sports. Girls like guys that play sports. They like the captain of the football team. And so we exercise and we eat weird food to try and build this muscle mass. And we drink nasty whey protein and all this stuff. And we get our Letterman's jacket, and then we got our jacket. And that's just not good enough. We have to practice how we look in our Letterman's jacket. So we stand in front of the mirror, and we strut our stuff, and we say stuff like, "Hey." We practice this stuff because we need that praise. It is hardwired into our person. Of course, we don't look nearly that cool when we're doing it in the school, in the halls of school. We're like, "Hey." Now, in the mirror, I got all the strut and stuff, but when you get out in public, it becomes a little stranger. Some guys got it down. I'll give them that. But we need female praise, especially the women that we love. Okay, it becomes even more critical. When that guy who was hanging from trees and then making weird noises and then got his Letterman's jacket, when he makes it big in the NFL and he runs that winning touchdown pass in the Super Bowl and the camera zooms in on him, he says, "Hi, Mom," because he loves Mom. And Mom has been there his whole life. We need praise from the women that we love. I need no one's praise worse than I need my wife's. I'm not looking for public recognition. If I wanted that, I'd go into politics. Those guys got issues in terms of praise. I'm just saying. But I need her to be proud of me. one of the best experiences in my life up to this point is when I graduated college. And it wasn't just because I graduated college. It wasn't just because I got a degree. It was because I got to take my wife with me. And she watched me walk across that stage, having accomplished something. And that was awesome. That was one of my favorite things in life, is knowing I had done something that she was proud of. I gave her beautiful little boys. I'm not sure how I gave them to her, but I did. And you guys will understand it when you have kids. Those of you that have kids, you understand the look on the mom and dad's face. They recognize, the gift that has been given, and that's a great time. Okay? We need that kind of praise. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33. Now, we've read through it. I want to read it to you out of the Amplified because I want you guys to pick this up, and they really go overboard on explaining it. It says, "And let the wife see that she respects and reverences her husband, that she notices him, regards him, honors him, venerates and esteems him, and that she defers to him, praises him, and loves and admires him exceedingly." Ladies, I understand it's hard sometimes to give that kind of affection, to give that kind of phrase. In fact, if I asked you to, you could probably think of a time this week where, I don't know, he did something and you brushed it off as though it was small change. I want you to understand how badly that tears a man down. Everything we do is for you. And even when we're being just morons, when you'd rather pound us with a skillet than pat us on the back, we need that praise from you. It's a ministry. It absolutely is. And in just as in ministry, when it starts getting hard, you don't give up on it. Okay, you continue forward for the glory of God, for His honor, for His praise. And in doing so, some of you ladies, you have the ability to win your husband to Christ. You don't give up on that ministry and all that entails. We men need female praise. Also, we need to believe that we are head. Okay? That's where the other end of this comes in. A husband needs to believe that he is the head of the marriage relationship. Has to believe it. Because if I'm not, then I'm not a man. That's how God designed us. Again, I'm not against women working. I have nothing against single moms. Okay? I'm not going to go into any of that this morning. We have a desire, though, to be the head of whatever castle I happen to be abiding in. It may be a shanty, it may be a shack, but you know what? That's my castle. And I should be king as far as that goes. Leader in my marriage as God designed it. Some women, and names pop off just immediately, but I'm not going to say them. Some women have that natural ability to take control, to take charge, to step into leadership. And you know what? In a lot of instances, that's absolutely fine and dandy. Not in the home. Now, if it's something that's crucial, that's critical, we should be conversing with our spouses about it. And if he's got some crack brain idea, tell him no. Okay? That's my exhortation to you. Don't just follow through with it because you're the wife. Tell him that's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But then again, if it's one of those things that's not quite critical, yeah, that's my job. And if I say I want to paint the living room fuchsia, you should be like, okay, you can repaint it later. When I realize, yeah, that was a stupid idea. And I'm like, honey, you fix that. Yeah, you go ahead. We need to, ladies, you have to submit to the authority of your husband in most things. Now, if your husband says that I'm going to beat you, or I'm going to take advantage of you, or I'm going to this, or I'm going to that because I'm the head of this house, don't stand by that. Absolutely. I don't care if you got to whack him with a Louisville Slugger. You are not a punching bag. And I'm not saying that you have to abide by that. What I'm saying is, in matters of most things, sometimes Finances is a big one, okay? Because it always causes natural tension in the household. And I've been honest, I've been up front. I know that she's smarter with money than I am. I make no qualms, quips, or queries about that. She's a genius when it comes to finances. Some of the guys in the shop, they think I'm raking in the dough. I'm making less than most of them. And they find out and they're like, oh my, how do you live on that? And I go, right there. She's a genius, man. She is a financial planning genius. But then we run into those times where I'm like, honey, I'm going to buy a torque wrench. It's $500 for a wrench. Yeah. And you know what she said? She said, you're an idiot. She says, I will beat you up. No, she didn't. She said, okay. She makes it work. I don't know how she does it, but she knows it's something that I've needed, that I've been needing, and something that now we have available funds to do. And she's like, okay. She submitted to my authority, which is amazing to me. Because I recognize it later on after I've purchased it, and I'm like, boy, that was stupid. I'm only going to use it like 2-3 times a year at that, but it does all this, but man, that was dumb. I thinking all the other, I could have bought her jewelry. I could have bought her this. I could have bought her that. She's seen it as a legitimate need and a decision that I had already come to, and she was like, okay. She knows I'm going to kick myself for it later. Ladies, you got to do that. Sometimes if it's not breaking the bank, if it's not putting your kids' lives in jeopardy, if it's not starving you out or causing you a loss of transportation or something along those lines, you just submit authority to your husband. Chances are he may know what he's doing, even if you don't. Okay? We have to have that. We have to be the head of our house. And even in those times where you're going to disagree and you're going to just speak common sense into your husband, which it could take a while, okay, you need to still allow him that authority to be head even while you're correcting him. And I don't know how best to explain to you to do that. But recognize it as you're going into it and just allow God to lead you in what you should say, think, and do. Ultimately, again, Christ is the absolute head of all things. And if you're desiring to bequeath Christly love on your husband and Christly leadership to your husband, then you're going to look to Christ to look to Him. Okay? One of the great deterrents, I think, to wifely submission has been the autocratic, unloving, insensitive clods known as the evangelical Christian husband. Okay, I understand that because we read passages like, husbands, see that your wife submits to you. It doesn't say that. It says husbands reverence your wives. It says wives submit to your husbands, but nowhere in there does it say husbands, see that your wife submits to you. That's not our job, husbands. Ladies, that's not our job. It's God's job. It's our responsibility to love our wives as much as it is your responsibility to submit to your husband. Okay? And the husband was created to be head of something, and the wife was elected to be that something. It's a clean-cut description, I think. But just because he was created by God to be the head doesn't mean that he's better than you. And don't allow him to think that he is. Okay, but at the same time, we have to learn to submit to him. Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 down through 8 says, Who, talking about Jesus, being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. Being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself, and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. If Christ could find it within himself, being equal with God, to submit his authority to people like us, ladies, I think you can find it within you to submit yourselves to your husband, as failed and flawed and faulted as he is. Okay? We need that. Finally, the husband's needs in the area of the body. Husbands, husbands need to believe that you chose him out of every other man on the face of this planet. Okay? Not that all of a sudden you have a headache or we could go on and on. We know how to fix that, don't we, Bill? 2 aspirins and a cup of water. And she says, I don't have a headache. And you say, all right. We need to believe that you have a desire for us, even in those times that you don't. I got to tell you, there's sometimes I come home and I want to kiss on my wife a little bit. And I'm covered head to toe in grease and transmission fluid and heaven only knows what else because I was doing it on the ground. And I got to tell you, I am not sexy that way. I just took my hat off. Well, when I still have my hair long, I'll take my hat off and I got this cowlick standing up in the back and this side's flat and that side's straight out. And I'm like, hey, baby. I know I'm not sexy like that. But I have this desire that when I look in her eyes to see desire. Okay, it's one of those things that, I don't know, faking it's not really the best way to say it, I guess. And we're not going to get too in-depth in this. Thank God we're running out of time. But I want you to understand that we have a physical need for you. Okay? And even more so as we become married. Now, it does give leeway in the Bible. It says, if you will put off for a time, let it be in agreement with one another, and let it be especially for the purpose of meditation and prayer and fasting. This is a weird way to say it, but ladies, if you're ever going to tell your husband no, it should be because you're telling Jesus yes. Okay? Physical intimacy is a beautiful thing. God created it. God designed it. And within the confines of marriage, it is one of the most wonderful things that you can share with one another physically. And ladies, I know sometimes that you're tired, that you have a headache, that whatever the reason. But it doesn't say just tell him you have a headache because you don't feel like it, because you're not in that loving, feeling kind of mood. Understand that we need it. It's like life's blood to us sometimes. And it's a good thing to be able to share with your husband. Now, because men and women view this area of marriage differently, there are different reasons why he may come home with that physical desire, and we're not going to get into that. I want you to recognize that if he's seen a pretty girl dressed up at work, or one of his coworkers, or he had a rough day at work, whatever it is that is driving him to this physical need, I want you to understand first and foremost that he came home. Okay? His desire is set on you. Whatever may have triggered it, somebody else may have sprayed the nitro and the gasoline, but it's geared towards you. And be thankful for that, because there are a lot of men that don't do that. Okay? That so many marriage counselors and stuff that you'll see on television, especially in like the Dr. Phil garbage, those guys that are going to help you make yourself right. They're going to say, well, you're not showing him enough affection, so he's going to go out and cheat. And they kind of pass the buck off on the wife on that. I'm telling you, that's not right. Okay, it is still your choice, men. But ladies, you ladies that has that man that's not going out and cheating, even if you're not showing him affection, you need to thank God for a good man. And then show him that. Show him you're thankful. Okay, and we'll just leave it at that. There you go. Men are not that complex in their needs, okay? We're really pretty cut and dry in as far as what we need to go, but it is very intense. And when it says that men need praise, wow, we do. So don't ever put that off lightly as well. I may have crushed his little hope streams and aspirations this time, but I'll make it up to him next time. Don't ever put that away like that, because it's detrimental to your husband's spiritual, soul, and physical well-being. Let's stand. We'll close in prayer. Men, you have to come back next week, okay? We've been hammering the ladies today. It wouldn't be fair if you didn't come back in next week, Steve Mays. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you, Lord, for the clear-cut design that you have given us in marriage. Lord, I thank you for the understanding of the differences between husbands and wives. I thank you for the opportunity to come to recognize and to somewhat understand those differences so that as we are addressing our spouses, we know how to respond. God, I pray for those ladies in here, Lord, those that have husbands, those that are looking forward to a time that they have husbands. God, that you would give them only a knowledge that you can provide into the inner workings of their husbands' brains. Heaven knows we don't understand ourselves sometimes, God, but where you have designed us, you understand us perfectly. You are able to impart to those ladies the knowledge that is needed so that in those times, God, that we're needing that praise, God, and when those times we're needing that recognition or we're needing that spot of authority or that feeling of submission by our wives to us, God, that they are able to provide that in a manner that glorifies you without demeaning them. Father, the ideal marriage is perfect as you had designed it, Lord, and I pray for each and every one of the people under the sound of my voice that in our views of marriage, we would desire that same thing, God, and that we would work through the instruction that you've given us to accomplish that purpose. Lord, watch over us in this week. In Jesus' name, amen.